This video is on how to tie a rethreaded figure 8 knot. So the main kind of context or use of this, in my particular case, is tying yourself into a climbing rope. So you're tying the rope directly to your harness, okay? We do that, that's preferable to using a carabiner on a figure 8 on a bite, because of course a carabiner could potentially open maybe in some very unusual circumstance which constitutes a safety risk. Tying ourselves in directly means that is now completely impossible. So what we've got to do is have a little bit of knowledge of the rope diameter we're using and the length that we need, and that takes a little bit of just practice and mucking around. So this is a 10.3, I think. What I would do in that case is measure the rope by pulling the end of it down the length of my arm. And I know from prior mucking about with this that I need a length of about from my fingertips to where my shoulder attaches to my body. And that's just right for me. If I use an 11 mil, it's more from my fingertips to my sternum in the center of my chest. Now, obviously, that will vary depending on how long your arms are and how thick the rope is. So if I was using something skinnier, of course I would use less rope, and something thicker requires more. So it's just a little way of measuring that to get it consistent. Now you need to measure it out so that you don't end up with too long or too short of a tail or too big of a loop. It's all about just getting it just right so that you end up with a really clean knot that you're very confident in, and it comes out the same every single time. So once I've got my length measured out, I need to add some twists. So to do this, I'm simply holding that out and I'm twisting it once and then twisting it a second time. And then whilst holding this, maintaining control of it, I place the end of the rope through there and pull all of that through. And I end up forming this figure 8 pattern. Okay, so we would call this a figure 8 knot. Now, here we've got to do the rethreading part now, and this is where it gets a little bit more confusing. So we take the end, and that gets passed through your belay loop and up, and this would then come quite close to your harness. Okay, you'd need almost all of the slack to tie the knot. So you just got to imagine that part. Now, what people tend to prefer to do is place this, when they're rethreading it, directly back in here, okay? I should actually go back one step, sorry. We need to hold it in this configuration so that the rope is coming out of the figure 8 knot towards us, as opposed to the alternative option, which is that where it's going down, okay? We need it coming out towards us before we actually do the rethreading part, okay? Now, as I was saying before, we can push it in through there and start our rethreading, but we end up with something that is, generally speaking, not dressed correctly the first time. To do that, what we need to do is actually just push this. Its preference is one side. It naturally wants to stay to one side. We just push that across and create a new hole. And that's where we want to place this rope. Now we pull all of that tail through. We only want a nice small bite here because we're tying into the harness. And now we've started our rethreading process. We just have to finish it off now, and this is the easy bit. So we're going to then bring this, keep it in front. Some people make the error of going in behind, but we need to preference the front here. So we run it along the front and parallel with this other strand. This can then come into this hole here, pull that through. Okay, you can already see it coming together. Now we go around the underside of the bite there and finish it off by going into this place here. Okay, so like always, we now go through and tighten each of the strands to make sure that the knot is appropriately set. And there is no need to actually dress this knot because we've tied it properly in the first place. So you can see that if you do it in a consistent way, it always will end up with, 1 to 2 hands width of tail, so an appropriate tail length, an appropriate bite size, and no need for mucking around with that and, redressing it and adjusting strands and trying to work out, what needs to go where. It's better off just to do it once and do it right, okay? Especially when it comes to knots that you want to be trusting with your life ultimately, and you need to feel very, very confident in them. So that's a rethreaded figure 8 on a bite.